It gives me great pleasure to be here today for the Sheikh Zayed Book Award seminar on Arabic literature in translation. I'd like to thank the Frankfurt International Book Fair for partnering with us on this exciting initiative, and the New York Public Library for hosting us. As Consul General for the UAE in New York, a favorite part of my job is encouraging cross-cultural understanding and building bridges between the UAE's growing cultural sector and the vibrant cultural communities in the US. Today's event, which helps to advance Arabic literature and culture, is particularly important for global cultural diversity, as Arabic is one of the most widely used languages worldwide.
Thank you. Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, good evening and a very warm welcome to our seminar. First of all, I would like to thank both of Frankfurt Book Fair, New York, and publishing prospective teams for supporting this cultural dialogue and exchange. It is an honor to be here today to introduce the translation funding that Sheikh Zayed Book Award is offering. It is an initiative we hope will contribute to increasing the number of Arabic books that are translated, published, and distributed outside the Arab world. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sheikh Zayed Book Award honored significant contribution to Arabic culture and designed to help foster scholarship and creative development. We believe that the achievements of our winners, while they reflect some of the most exciting cultural streams in the Arab world today, we need to support their availability in other languages to reach a bigger audience. With this in mind, and knowing that such initiatives are mainly reliant on subsidies, we excite our support to fund the translation fees as well as illustrations and promotional costs for the literary and children's titles that have won the Sheikh Zayed Book Award. This cultural and literary support could not have taken place without support of the Department of Culture and Tourism, Abu Dhabi, which is committed to reviving cultural and highlighting the vision of Abu Dhabi's openness and cultural connections.
Probably I'm here in many different roles. As you might know, the Frankfurt Book Fair does not only run the world's largest, most international book fair, but we have different tasks. We have to promote German cultures abroad. We have offices all over the world, in India, in Moscow, here in New York, in Delhi, in Jakarta, some country I always forget, Beijing, China. So we have an office in Beijing. So we have to support German culture, but we also have to work enabling, helping, setting up publishing infrastructures all over the world. It's very important to bring people together. And the third role, which is also very, very important to our industry, but actually to everybody in the world, freedom to publish, freedom to speech, we have to fight for, we have to work on this. And in all of these roles, I came in 2006 for the first time to Abu Dhabi. And we had discussions about working on the book fair, which already existed for many years, improving it, internationalizing it, professionalizing it. And over these years, I think I became a friend of Abu Dhabi, and the people I met became friends to me as well. And I think translations are the most important thing to understand other cultures. But we also have to honor the people behind these translations. It's about the publishers, the translators, it's the authors. So we have to make these people visible. This is what we are trying to tonight at this reception. So thank you very much for joining us and celebrating the translators and this award, and shukran.
What's one book or one author maybe that deserves to be or should be in English, whether or not you've translated them yourself, but if you had your druthers, if you could wave a magic wand, what is a book that you wish, or an author you wish would be available in English, or should be?
I mean, it's awkward to say, but I'm working on a book that I think should, that I feel very,
the best answer to
that
give.
I feel very strongly about, that I think would be wonderful in English, which is Yassine Adnan's Hot Maroc, which is, I think, from 2016, which was long-listed or shortlisted for the Arabic Booker Prize, which is, I mean, it's a wonderful book of a, it's a very, I mean, it's the story of a young man growing up in Morocco, having earned a useless degree in classical Arabic literature, much like myself, who can't figure out how to operate in the world of his the sort of awkward late teens, early 20s, and it takes place in the 90s and into the 2000s when the internet comes to Morocco, and he and his friends and his peers find a world, and everybody really around the world finds a world that didn't exist before, and finds a place where they can interact with one another freely.
I have a list too. I'll just mention one. I was talking about advocacy a moment ago, and I don't think I am a strong candidate for the ringleader of that advocacy group, because I've been advocating for the Syrian writer Fawaz Haddad for nearly a decade now, and I think that Fawaz Haddad is the greatest living Syrian writer. He remains untranslated into English. I would start with the 2009 novel, Solo Piano Music, which I happen to have translated, but I think that his entire oeuvre deserves to come into English, including his 2016 novel, Enemy Syrians, which is a novel of the Syria war, which has, within the frame story of the current Syria war, a meditation on violence, justice, and reconciliation around the massacre in Hama in 1982. So I think Fawaz Haddad is noteworthy for writing beautiful fiction, which is of a high literary quality, but is also political and deals specifically with issues in and around Syria since his first novel was published in 1990. And he continues to write at a maddening clip. It seems every other year he publishes a new novel. So I would love to see Fawaz Haddad in English.
I'll just mention, my wish list is I'll keep it very short. One is brilliant writer that was the subject of my dissertation, Iraqi writer from Basra, Mohammad Khodair, who is now in his 70s, sort of a grand old man of Basra's literary scene. He's very much, for someone who's rarely left Basra, he's very much a man of the world, and he's sort of comparable to Borges, who clearly he's interested in labyrinths, he's interested in sort of the connections between authors internationally. It's a very sort of unusual, brilliant writer, and again, one of his novels has been translated into English. The rest of his writing has not.
I mean, the landscape of Arabic literature and translation has long been a somewhat barren one. And so those of us of this generation who were seeking ways to publish literature and translation didn't have a whole lot of signposts we could look to. There, as I mentioned before, were a number of stalwart independent publishers in the US and the UK. There were a number of university presses, primarily in the US, who had put out lists of Arabic literature and translation. But there was no real roadmap for aspiring translators of my generation. We had to basically figure it out as we went along. And so what I am pleased to see is that there does seem to be an emergent infrastructure for Arabic literature and translation, although this does seem to still be somewhat inchoate, and it's not entirely clear to me what exactly that infrastructure is going to look like in the coming years.
Yeah, so it's gotten easier in a way. I'm very encouraged by a much more receptive media climate. I think there's a real interest in covering writers from that part of the world and translations in general, which is something I didn't find 10 years ago.
What I see now is, I mean, just in the past couple of years, I think I can think of 2 publishing houses in Morocco. Children's book publishing houses have opened up there, working very heavily on translating world children's literature into Arabic, or into French, but also really relying heavily on Moroccan authors and international illustrators to come out with really beautiful editions of children's Moroccan specific or Arab more generally, children's literature, young adult literature. As I said, so I mean, just in the past, I think I said 5 years, 2 of opened up, and I'm imagine that's a trend. But
then really the rubber hits the road if an editor who doesn't read Arabic is considering a book. Often it is the risk where a translator may have to then translate chapter 1 and see what happens, see if they like it, or do a very detailed synopsis, which is a lot of work in the hopes that you might they'll bite, I guess.
We have acquisitions editors around the world who are proficient in French and German and other European languages, even, I suppose, to some extent in some East Asian languages, in Chinese, Japanese, Korean. But we don't have acquisitions editors who are capable of reading in texts in the original Arabic, which means that John and his colleagues must rely on the kindness and the labor of, I'd say, primarily academics or professional translators who can provide those reports to you. So it does seem to me that there still is a kind of curating that's going on, and whether the trend towards dystopian fiction or science fiction or young adult is to do with the turn among translators having an interest in that, maybe because they're coming of age and having children, or whether this has to do with a general market in the Arab world or in other markets or in other societies, is kind of unclear to me. But
the typical ways that I, when I'm looking at the rest of the world, have to identify a prospect for translation is, has this book been a success in its home country? Has it been a bestseller? Has it won prizes? And that is so difficult to answer. Those are such difficult questions to answer when you're talking about, at least in my experience, when you're talking about Arabic books. Because I think the culture is disaggregated. So I think there has to be other ways, So with that first book that I published, Wolves of the Crescent Moon, it was a translator's enthusiasm that made me believe in it. And then I read it and I became enthusiastic. So it's really, an editor's job has been said to be to fall in love. And we can't fall in love if we can't read something, and we can't fall in love. It's hard to fall in love. If we can't read something, then it's really hard to fall in love unless somebody else has fallen in love with it too and wants to kind of infect you with that love. So these conversations are very helpful.
It's always there's no good publishing without enthusiasm behind it, I guess.
Could I add
Did you?
something
Sure.
to that? Yeah, I will add by saying that I think John and his ilk are doing the best they can. They don't have to learn Arabic. It would be pretty awesome if John decided that he wanted to learn Arabic and integrate that into his work, and I invite him to do
Lessons.
so. But I do think that there are competing constituencies that are in play in the field of Arabic literature and translation, and so John has to, in some ways, straddle the financial, his sales force on the one side, and the intellectual merits of the work, whether that's historical or cultural or otherwise. And it seems to me that that Arabic fiction, modern contemporary Arabic fiction, cannot be its own advocate. So it requires the work of translators primarily, but also in some cases, publishers, to be the vector for that work's journey into.